Huge, massive hello to you guys out there in YouTube land. You can hear the dogs are getting excited.
She's
you can
chewing
hear,
on a bone
yeah,
back
you can
there.
hear them behind us. They're getting ready for the show. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Today's video, we're going to talk about a very common mistake that people make in their training. And it's, you know, sometimes we're working really hard to help our dogs to be successful. And we think we're doing everything right. But the advantage that we have in seeing so many handlers and students over the course of a week, over the course of a month, is we start to see like these little common mistakes that people make. And in today's video, we're going to talk to you specifically about a simple mistake that people make that's actually teaching their dog to ignore them and giving their dog a bit of a mixed signal. But that's what we're going to dive into today. You know, we actually skipped the pre-show because we wanted to get right down to the meat of things. So in today's show, we're going to talk about the dog training mistake that is teaching your dog to ignore you. I'm Ken Steepe.
I'm Kayl McCann.
Welcome back to McCann Dogs.
I feel like we're like a little rusty because we've had a week off. Well, I've actually had 2 weeks off because 2 weeks ago you were doing live stream at lesson number 1 and I was talking. So I actually haven't been on the air for like 3 or 4 weeks.
It's been some time. Now, if this is your first time here and you don't have any idea who we are, my name is Ken Steepe. This is Kayl McCann. We're professional dog trainers at McCann Dogs. And at McCann Dogs, we train more than 500 dogs every week to be well-behaved, four-legged family members, you know, to walk on a loose leash, to come when called, to just generally... To give people...
Be a better listener.
Yeah, to be a better listener, to give people an opportunity to do more with their dogs.
And to enjoy their family pets instead of be annoyed by them.
It's so important, isn't it? It's such an important thing. I just have to get something set up here. I don't know if you can just fill time for just a moment while I set this up.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about this today is because it's something that, as Ken said, comes up so much with our students. And when you see such a wide range of students, so we have like 500 students that come through the school a week, you end up seeing a lot of the same things amongst a bunch of people. And it's pretty normal when somebody thinks that they're making a mistake that, you know, 5 other people in the room are making the exact same one. And that actually can be really helpful because you can, you know, learn from one another, and it allows us to really pinpoint those errors because we see them happen often, and we also see what results with the dog when these things start to happen. And we have a lot of people that say to us things like, you know, my dog's really great, but, you know, they only listen to me when I have the leash on or when I have the food out or my hands in my pocket. And there's some really particular distinct reasons why that happens, and a lot of the time we don't even know that we're doing it. So that's kind of what we wanted to talk to you about tonight, so that you don't fall sort of into those roles and be making those mistakes, and you can set out on the right foot with your dog.
Absolutely. Now, for those of you, and I see lots of familiar faces, familiar names in the chat, but for those of you who know the name of the game here on the train station, you'll know that we have some pretty helpful support that you're going to see in the chat. You've already seen them already. We have Dan.
He's already making fun of my hair.
Dan, lots of links. Luton is there in the chat, and we will often go to a satellite shot of him. And now I had to do some rewiring of the satellite. I'm going to be honest. So
gosh.
yeah, we'll just see how this goes. But I'm going to go to our live shot of Dan. As you can see, he's in the chat. We'll just see what he's doing. Oh boy.
Oh, what's happening?
I have definitely, I'm going to have to turn the What's Banger about 90 degrees, I think, to really get an appropriate shot of Dan, because it was, that's a little bit twisted. Regardless, you'll also know, if you've been here in the train station with us, one of the really fun things for me is during the show, after the show, we like to...
Thank you, Daria.
Oh, somebody's already lighting up the train station here. Daria, thank you.
And a subscriber as well. Thank you so
very
much.
Thank you very much for making things light up here in the train station. We certainly appreciate it, and you can see now.
Yeah.
Here comes our little Daria thing.
So awesome. Thank you so much.
Very helpful. Thank you very much for the super chat, or the super sticker, or whatever that was. We appreciate it. But you guys will know, we love to really know where you guys are watching us from. It's something that I just love doing. And also, you'll also know that I toot a lot while we're here on screen. So
I just want to make sure before we get a bunch of the stream going, Daria's just asked a question, and since she just gave us a super chat, I think we should answer it.
Yep. I like this.
Why do you say good cue? Example, good weight is only when you're first teaching a cue. That's a really good question. So basically, we like to use the word good as part of a praise to sort of reiterate a cue, especially if it's something that the dog is already doing. So we could even keep it simple and use sit as example. So if we ask the dog to sit and then the dog does sit, we like to say good sit once they're sitting to sort of reinforce that word. It actually really helps to teach the dog the command, but then it's being shown in a very positive way. And it's very different than saying sit,
Right.
sit, and the dog not responding. So we like to sort of, if the dog looks at you, good, look at me, or whatever it might be, it just sort of allows the dog to receive a little bit more information in way of praise, and it goes a long way with them.
What's even more important is that at the moment when the dog makes a decision, because there's some conversation about is repeating a word or repeating a command really impactful on the dog. It's even more, whether it is or not, it works. But we know that it's even more important if a distraction goes by. For example, and you're working on your sit or whatever, your sit, stay, whatever. A distraction goes by and the dog chooses to remain in position, chooses something. Good sit, good stay. Really acknowledge those choices that your dog's making, because we want to give them an opportunity to make some choices. Reinforcing that choice that they make is very, very helpful. Now we are zooming away here.
Yes, there's also someone else that said that they saw my TED Talk, and that's
cool.
Thank you for
very cool.
saying
but
that.
Before we get too far, I want to say hi to the island engineer, who's a multiple-time train station passenger from Puerto Rico. I see Gail from Canberra, Australia. Adriana from Astoria.
Where are my Aussies at?
Shauna from Fairfield. I see Jennifer from Jennifer and Dentino from Orange County, California. Carol from Pennsylvania. That's Jade saying, "Where's my Aussies at?" Mike from Sacramento. Savage Narwhal from Texas! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Susan from Bancroft. Very cool. She's the first live chat and watching your videos all day. Very helpful.
Liz, the Toller puppy.
Liz from Atlanta. Music Forever from Hamilton, Ontario.
Cool.
Right here at home. Thanks for hanging out with us, Music Forever. Pika Steph from Los Angeles. John from Montana. It's moving really quickly now. Lisa from Kansas. I see Andrea here from Kona, Hawaii.
Well, that is a very special place. We got married there almost a year ago.
Yeah, that's true.
We're coming up to a year.
Melinda joining us.
Oh, Melinda's on my Patreon, Agility.
Melinda, yeah. I see Siobhan from, where did that go? It's moving so quickly. From Busan, South Korea.
Nice.
Very cool. Thanks for joining us here, guys.
Woo.
And for all of you guys, I see Daryl from Mississauga. That's not very far away at all. Thanks for joining us here, Daryl. So,
first live.
Let's talk a little bit about.
Awesome.
Let's talk a little bit about cues and how important the cues that how important the cues are that we give to our dog, and why it's so important to be clear. We talk about the 3 things that you need to be. If you're ever in a situation where you're like, geez, I don't really know if this is the right choice that I need to make for my dog, think of these 3 things. Are you being clear? Are you being consistent? And are you being fair? So being clear is off the top one of the most important things that you can be for your dog. And
it's a lot harder than it sounds.
It's much harder than it sounds. And this is where a dog trainer can be quite helpful. Or you as training at home, recording yourself can also be super helpful. Like
massive.
Everybody has a music or has a video recorder on their phone. That can be really helpful in your throughout your training process. Let's talk about what we mean when we're talking about giving conflicting cues, mixed cues, multiple cues when we're looking for a single behavior. Ultimately, we want our dogs to listen to our voice, the verbal cues that we give them. All of our training is set up so that ultimately our dogs will respond, whether they have a leash or a line on or nothing at all, whether we have food in our hand, a toy in our back pocket, or nothing at all. We want our dogs to listen to our verbal cues. And that's what we're working towards all the time.
And the reason why we want to work to that level of training is it allows our dogs to have a bit of independence and freedom without sacrificing control and safety. So I want to be able to take my dog outside in the backyard and play with her and have her just hang out, while we're doing stuff. I want to be able to take her for hikes. I want to be able to take her to different places and not have to always have her contained on the leash or have to have food on me in order to get to listen, for her to listen to me. And of course, you need to work your way up to giving the dog that freedom. But we really feel that being able to have that type of freedom, it just allows your dog to have a more, enjoyable life, and for you and your dog to have a stronger relationship, because once they learn to listen to you and are reliable, you can do so much more with them and you end up enjoying them so much more. And that's really, what our goal is for our dogs and what, we want for you guys as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about what we ultimately want. We talked about being clear, consistent, and fair with our dogs. But there's oftentimes some of these subtle mistakes that people make throughout the course of their training, and they're trying so hard for their dogs to be successful that it's actually giving the dog sort of mixed information. It's not really being clear with your dog. And we're going to talk about three sort of common exercises, components of your training that you're going to do with your dog. We're going to talk specifically about walking on leash. We're going to talk about sitting down, and that's one, it's really quite an overused command, or
response to name sort of falls into that one as well.
Right. Yeah, it can. But we're also going to talk about the recall command. This is why so many people come to us. The reliable recall is something you must teach to your dog, because the amount of time someone has like called our office and spoken with one of our trainers in the office there and said, like, I'm in like week 5 of grade 1 and my sister left the door open and our dog ran out. We called come and the dog ran back. You don't know when you hope you never need this. But this is like your emergency recall. This is the command that's going to really insist that your dog come back to you on that single command. Somebody else, it's double. Very cool. Thanks for dropping the super chat. Deep Mindfulness Collective. That's awesome. Thank you.
She also has a question to go along with it.
Okay. Very cool.
I love it.
Yeah. And this is a good question. And this is kind of topical. We can definitely address this right now. So let me just grab that.
There, I think.
Yep. Okay. Let's talk about this. So, Deep Mindfulness Collective question: the number of repetitions required to proof a behavior. Now, I know that there are some trainers that believe a definitive number is what you're working towards, or will sort of give you some confidence that your dog will respond appropriately in a future situation. But I also have seen enough dogs to know that it's not a definitive number.
No, it's so relative to so many things.
Absolutely. But the proof is in the proofing. So let's talk a little bit about proofing some of these behaviors, regardless of what it is, whether it's like a response to name or whatever. Let's talk about how we proof some of these things and when we have a better sense of whether a dog will be right or not.
Yeah, so basically, when it comes down to recalls or response to name or whatever it might be, we would get into like the proofing phase of a behavior once we've done all the groundwork and the foundation work. And the way that we train dogs is we believe that the dog, what they learn first, they learn best. So what we want to do is set them up to do whatever behavior it is that we're hoping for successfully every single time. And in order to achieve that level of success, it requires the dog to have a lot of assistance and a lot of help from us. Once we've done the groundwork, then we want to get into where we're working on the proofing phase. And what that means is that, we're taking a behavior that we feel our dog has a strong understanding of already, and we're basically saying, okay, can you come when you're called when you're 20 feet from me now? Can you come when you're called when there's food on the ground and you have to leave it? Can you come when you're called when there's a dog nearby? So that we have reliability in those particular exercises. But when we start to proof things, what often happens is there isn't always a lot of trust or confidence coming from the handler, and they end up falling back onto adding extra cues, and most times they don't even know that they're doing it, that sort of assist the dog in coming, which never allows the dog to learn to do it independently. So it could be something like when they call the dog, they're automatically pulling the leash tight, or they call the dog and they have their hand in their bait pouch, or they have a full hand of food. And that's all fine to do initially in your training, but if you're always requiring, your dog to turn and look and see if your hand's in your bait pouch or whether you're pulling on the leash, you're going to have a dog that learns to come with the view of food or with the assistance of a leash, but you're going to miss out on that extra little step up where your dog is able to do it reliably without those specific aids. So just to get a little dog training technical on you here, dogs learn within a special time frame. So they learn within 1 second. So if your goal is to train your dog to listen to your voice, you need to make sure that you've separated your verbal command. So let's use come as an example. You would say come in a separate step than pulling the leash or using some food to show your dog. Because if I was to have, pizza on Ken's nose right now.
I love pizza.
You absolutely do. And I was to talk to him about, doing his laundry, he would probably be so focused on, staring at the piece of pizza. I know what you're thinking. Looking at the piece of pizza, he's not really thinking about what I'm doing. So if I was to say, hey, Ken, can you do your laundry? here's a piece of pizza to assist you, he would say, you know what, that sounds pretty good. And if I repeat that enough times, he's going to say, well, every time I do my laundry, I get pizza. So that sounds like a pretty good deal to me. But what a lot of people end up doing is they show the goods first. They say, here's, what I'm bribing you with. Now will you listen to me? Or the dog ignores them and they say, okay, fine. And then they pull out the food and say, now will you listen? And that dog goes, aha, I know exactly how to get what I want. I just ignore you until you bribe me or you pull me, and then I have to listen. So that's kind of what we're getting at. And that process that I've just explained to you, it can be used for so many exercises, the recall, walking on a leash, sits downs, all this. We'll go over all of that with you tonight, but that's sort of like the dog training technical side of things.
Yep. Good. So let's talk a little bit about walking on leash specifically. There are a few things that a lot of people do when they're training their dog to walk on a loose leash that they're not even aware of. But boy, oh boy, oh boy, do they make a big difference. Now, we start at the very foundational level with a young dog, and again, so often people will send me a message, or there's so many comments in the videos, it's hard to keep up anymore, but they'll say, I love your puppy videos, but my dog's I just got him and he's rehomed, rescue or something like that. But he's 11 months old. Yeah. So as we're talking about young dogs, puppies, or dogs in training, age doesn't matter. I don't want you to be so focused on age once you have an adult dog after 16 weeks.
This is all about experience level.
Their level of understanding. Absolutely. Andrea Dunton, we'll just touch this really quickly. So we don't use pinch collars in our training. The hard part about pinch collars is that we don't believe in that kind of, using the painful stimulus on the dog. But more importantly, or maybe as importantly, we don't want you to become dependent on any piece of equipment. So any piece of equipment that we choose, we are always focused on working away from it so that you don't have to have that thing on your dog.
And we know that building a really solid relationship and teaching the dog to learn to want to work for you, typically you don't have to use something as dramatic as a pinch collar. There's lots of other methods you can go first. Everybody obviously has their own opinions and choices, but we're not advocates of that particular collar.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk about walking on a loose leash. So when you're out there training your dog, when you're working with your dog, what are you doing with your body? So as I started to mention, we use food at the very beginning of training. It's a donkey and carrot, to be honest. If your dog is struggling with their level of understanding, with their leaving you for other distractions, you need to alter the amount of distraction that you're giving to your dog. But you also need to make sure that you give them something to focus on. But these are the beginning steps. So what we want you to really think about is, when does your dog have a more solid understanding of being in that position? When is it time to remove the food? So often people get to a point where they think, my dog's doing pretty well. I'm just going to put the food away.
Yeah, I'm just going to go for it.
Absolutely. And it turns into a complete train wreck. And it's not helpful for the dog. And you must have these tiny progressions and working on these exercises, increasing the level of distraction, increasing the distance briefly, bit by bit, before you take on any greater challenges.
And I think to add to that is, a lot of those things that he's saying are absolutely perfect. And what we would suggest that you not do is change a lot of those variables at once, because that's another mistake that people make. Things are going really well, and then all of a sudden they ditch the food, they go on a 30-minute walk, and they happen to walk by a dog park. So you have high distractions, way too much time, and not a lot of assistance. So when you're building on an exercise and trying to create reliability, you want to change some of those variables, maybe wean off of some of the assistance. But when you do that, do it in a less distracting environment, or only do it for a short amount of time. Dog training and getting really great results is about building on success, because dogs learn through repetition, but they also seek positive reinforcement. They are not going to repeat something that they don't like. They are going to repeat something that they find valuable, whether you assist them in making it find valuable or whether they just find it valuable themselves, which is why dogs do things like drag the leash so that they can go and play with other dogs. If my dog pulls on the leash and I let him, pull me over to play with another dog, I've now taught the dog pulling on leash earns play with other dogs. So they're always thinking about what earns them a reward. So that's why we need to control those things so that we're just going in baby steps, because you get a lot more reliability and a lot more success that way.
When you're working on your loose leash walking, and again, we're gonna work through a few different exercises or talk about a few different exercises tonight. But when you are training your loose leash walking with your dog, I want you to be really self-aware. What do I look like as we're moving? What do I look like in between rewards? You know, do I always have my hand in my bait pouch? It's a really common one, and people say, "Oh, my dog's so great."
I'm always on my students about that.
Right?
They don't even know they're doing it.
They say, "Oh, my dog is so great," unless I'm not have my bait pouch, or unless I'm not rewarding.
Yeah.
And excuse me, what I'll often see is, okay, well, let's work on the show me. And they'll say, okay, well, get their bait pouch on, and then they'll walk along with their hand in their bait pouch. You know, it really gives the dog something to focus on, because the dog knows reward is coming through there. But I will tell you, you don't want to walk around with a bait pouch. You don't want to walk around with food forever. You know, it's great in the beginning. And actually, we, if you, Dan can send our link to the store. We have our bait pouches who are now available for you guys. We have a store set up for that. And we've actually
so handy.
Super handy. But you need these kinds of tools in the beginning. What you've got to be careful of is you don't become dependent on them. You don't want to have to use something like your hand in your bait pouch to get whatever the behavior is that you're looking for. Thank you very much, Laszlo, Bodhi. We appreciate the super sticker. That's very cool.
How come our lights aren't going off?
I think it's because it's a super sticker. Now, I don't really know the difference, but
okay.
Yeah. So be aware of what you're doing with your hand. Be aware of your hand in your bait pouch, or in your pocket. You know, maybe you're walking with your hand in your sweater, and your dog is just fixated, focused on that, where the reward's coming from. That's not what you're looking for, because that isn't a bit. You know, that's not something that you. It's hard if you don't have the food, if you don't have that pocket or that pouch, you're not going to get the same behavior. So really think like a dog trainer. What am I ultimately working toward here? What am I ultimately rewarding and reinforcing? Can you move over just a little bit for me?
No, I want to be in the center of the camera.
I know. Okay, I'm going to sit here. Hello, everyone.
What I was going to say to that is make sure that when you are getting to the step where you don't want to be holding food, you don't want to have your hand in your bait pouch. Again, I just want to remind everybody that's after you've done your foundation training. So if you feel like at this point your dog is going to walk horribly if you don't have the food, it could mean that you're not ready for that step, and you might as well just have the food in your hand and having it right out and helping your dog.
Totally.
So be smart about your decisions. I don't want you guys going out for a walk and being like, Kayl and Ken told us not to hold food.
Yeah, that's funny.
And then everything goes out the window.
Yeah.
So make sure that you're making a proper decision as to whether you feel your dog's ready for the step. So that's the end game. That's where we're headed.
Yeah.
But it's not just like some magic thing that happens overnight. It does take time. The bait pouch comment, it also reminded me of something else that a lot of people do when they're walking their dog, and that is they will walk and they will hold the leash very tight, or they'll hold the leash with two hands, and us dog trainers call it the water skiing method, because when the dogs start to pull, people sort of look like they're water skiing. And there's specific techniques that we use in our classes to teach dogs not to pull, and in how we adjust the leash and so on and so forth. But one thing that we really want to get across to people is that when your dog is doing a good job, you don't want to have that left hand riding on the leash or both hands riding on the leash, creating constant tension at all times. Yep. Because dogs are so wise, and they're so aware of when there's a little bit of tension on their collar versus no tension whatsoever. And if my ultimate goal is that I can have my dog out and about with me without having to have the leash in my hand or even on the dog, we don't recommend you walk your dog without a leash on around the block or anything. But out in the backyard, you want to eventually be able to take your dog outside without a leash on. But if you're always having tension on the leash, you go to take that dog off leash, and they're going to go, whoa, that's a big new feeling. I'm free, and I'm going to use and abuse this freedom. So,
lighten up the train station. Look at that. Carol Gibbons with the $5 super chat. Thank you very much. Look at how much. This
my gosh.
It's like a dance party.
I
feel like I need to do like a robot thing. I don't really know.
I feel like you're better at the beatboxing than I am. I'll stick to singing.
I'll take it. Carol asks a question here. Let's go to Carol's question. Carol asks, getting a 5-month-old Iggy. How many different things can I work on training Master 1 before moving on to the next? I like this question.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and it's so many people think that okay, I'm gonna double down on this one behavior, response to name, let's say, and I'm gonna make sure the dog's great at it before I move on to the next thing. What you're going to find, and you'll see throughout our videos, we have lots of different puppy training videos and young dog training videos that talk about a collection of skills or a collection of behaviors that sort of lend themselves to one another. So working on something like response to name and the recall, you can do some foundational stuff for both of those, like restrained recalls. You can do
collar grabs or
taking the collar. Yeah, getting your dog to come in nice and close, taking the collar. So your best approach when it comes to training these young puppies is to work on short exercises multiple times a day. So, maybe breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or whatever fits your schedule. You're going to work on something for a couple minutes. And then I'd record it. I'd literally write it down on the fridge, on your countertop, or something like that with like half a handful of food. Work until the food is gone, and then your next training session, you can work on some different ones. So things I would focus on are response to name, some handling,
And by handling, that means getting the dog comfortable with you, touching their ears, putting your hand in their collar, holding their paws, things that you're going to need to do to care for your dog, or, vet visits or grooming, whatever it might be. That's what we mean by handling. So.
Yeah, for sure. That's okay. I forget where I was. Taking the collar, did we talk about that?
Nope, but that's part of handling. That's a super important one for young dogs, though. All dogs. Really. Luring
is another one. It's so foundational. And with a 5-month-old dog, they might be pretty good at that. But you can do stuff like it has nothing to do with like skills training, trick training, like a spin, or trick training like a weave between your legs.
Love trick training.
It's great puppies. Because it builds confidence. It gets the dog problem solving a little bit.
It teaches them how to learn.
And that is the key. Teaching your dog how to learn. Whether it doesn't matter what you're working on, but all of these things add together. They're like a collection of skills that are going to make your dog better. They're going to make your dog listen more reliably. Super chat coming in from Stacy Scarcella. Yeah. Thank you for joining us here, Stacy. $2 super chat.
Thank you.
Very, very cool.
Just before we answer that, I really, truly believe that one of the reasons why our dogs, so many people say to us, oh yeah, you're a dog trainer. Your dogs just stare at you because you're a dog trainer and blah, 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 blah. And yeah, we do know what we're doing, and that certainly helps. But I honestly think one of the reasons why the dogs get trained so quickly is because of what we do with them when we first get them. And we have had dogs as baby puppies from the beginning. We've also had a couple dogs that we've gotten as older. We took a dog in at 9 years old, and we did exactly the same thing with all of the dogs. But basically, we focus on relationship building and just teaching them how to learn, and that's where we do tricks and all these little things that we're talking about. Because once the dog sort of says, "I like doing stuff for you. When I work for you, you reward me, you pet me, you praise me. I really enjoy that." When we start to then get into things that are a little bit more, I don't want to say important, but like life skills, like walking on a leash, coming when they're called, staying, not jumping up, those types of things, we've already developed a rapport with the dog about working and that it's fun and enjoyable to do it. So rather than waiting until the dog's, 10 months or older, just sort of running the roost and, doing whatever they want, and then all of a sudden you say, hey, you want to work for me, which is absolutely possible, and you can do that. It's much easier to start with small things and then build up to a little bit more reliability.
For sure. Okay, we got to get moving along.
Oh,
for another super chat.
Holy.
Brett Leroux has dropped a $10 super chat. Okay, we're going to get to
Stacey.
Yeah, we'll get to Stacy's first, and then we'll get back to Brett's.
Thank you so much,
Brett.
Yeah,
thank you very much, Brett. You know what I haven't done? I haven't tooted nearly enough here in the train station.
You are dropping.
Okay, so Stacy mentions my 1-year-old is being aggressive towards other dogs. Now, Stacy, there are so many small decision moments, elements that can go into a situation where your dog's being aggressive towards other dogs that I don't feel confident giving you a specific answer, because every dog's a little bit different, and because that trigger might be the thing that I tell you
why it's happening for us to give you the appropriate
response for it.
What we can tell you, and you can interrupt me because I just interrupted you there.
That's okay.
What we can tell you is that what you need to do is really think about what circumstances it's most likely to happen, and you need to work hard to avoid those scenarios. So if it's towards other dogs, if it's towards people, if it's when the dog is cornered, if it's when it sees people on the street, whatever it might be, you need to start to determining the situation in which it happens, and then you need to avoid those situations for now until you can seek, some, one-on-one advice from a behaviorist or a dog trainer, that has proper methods to deal with those types of things. But until you can get some proper assistance on finding the root and then teaching you exactly what to do when that happens, the best advice we can possibly give you is don't let the behavior continue to rehearse,
right.
Because that will sort of lend its way to being able to find a solution. But again, probably need to seek a behaviorist or a trainer to help you with that, to make sure that you get off on the right foot.
Do your research. Do your research on the behaviorist.
Yeah, there's lots of methods out there, unfortunately, so it's a bit overwhelming, but you just need to make sure that
that person is experienced, you believe in their methodology, like really
their techniques,
do some research. Okay, so from Brett, thank you very much for the $10 super chat, Brett. Brett says, our 10-week-old puppy is very mouthy. He tends to bite my 18-year-old son. He's not mean, he's just excitable. He doesn't do it nearly as much with me, but I can't explain to my son why. Help. Now, Brett, this is more common than you might think.
So common.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to talk a little bit about household? How to manage that?
Yeah, it's super normal for puppies to evaluate, if you will, the different people in the household and where they think they fit in the pecking order. A lot of times the puppies will start to sort of realize that there's, a couple natural leader type personalities in the house, and then a couple people who maybe they see sort of at a puppy litter mate type of level. And those are the people that the puppies usually feel that it's appropriate to nip and bite, because that's what they would do with their brothers and sisters in the litter. Typically, they don't nip and bite the mom, because if that happens, it only happens once. And then mama takes care of it, and the puppy learns, okay, that's out of bounds. I'm not allowed to do that. So it isn't definitely not uncommon for, things to be divided in a household. And the most common place that we see it are the adults versus the kids in the house. Now, 18-year-old, he's not really a kid, but it could have to do with personality or how they're interacting with one another. So typically, especially like young guys, they like to rough and wrestle and play. And that can give mixed messages to the puppy, because the puppies, could say, well, we're always playing together, so why am I not allowed to nip and bite you? So a couple of things to think about is make sure that when the puppy is out and about with any of the family members, including yourself and your wife or whoever the situation is, that puppy should have some type of leash or line on in the house. We recommend just cutting the handle off so that it can slip and slide through the furniture more easily, so the puppy stays safe, so that if the pup decides to nip and bite or have a little crazy, excitable moment, you can diffuse the situation effectively and quickly by getting a hold of the leash, lifting up and sort of immobilizing the puppy, and just hold the puppy off of you, a foot or so, just to encourage the puppy to not actually be able to follow through with the nipping. And after a few moments, the puppy will eventually have to sort of say, ugh, this is not really working. And once they settle, you can then praise the puppy and then do something productive, like work a sit with the pup, or a down, or a little spin, or something that gets the dog working, rather than just sort of letting it be free and letting the situation happen again. On top of that, and this is hopefully helpful for other people in the chat as well, be careful that you're not, this is actually so in line with what we're talking about tonight. It can be really confusing for a dog if we are putting ourselves in situations where we're lowering our status, like letting them get up on the couch and being in our face, or getting down on the ground and rolling around with them, or letting them sleep in the bed, or all of these things that sort of say we're on the same level. Not that I'm not against any of those things. My dog sleeps in the bed. She's on the couch with me, but that's because she clearly knows I'm in charge, and we've already gone through all of the songs and dances of being a young adolescent dog. We're done that. She's respectful. She's wonderful. So I'm happy to give her as much freedom in the world. But when they're puppies, we are a little bit more apprehensive to be putting them in scenarios where it's really easy for the puppy to be confused about where they stand, and then they're more likely to nip and bite. So just keep some of those things in mind, and I'm sure you'll start to see some improvement.
Yeah, and Brett mentions that he's always on leash, even if he's dragging it. Really,
Yes.
really smart. That's really,
Yeah,
I think
so
you're
don't be
on the
afraid
right
to
path.
pick it up and use it.
Yeah. Okay, we should keep moving along. I
Yep.
see lots of great questions. I'm trying to grab some if they go in the, we'll save them in the queue. It's hard to keep up though. So we're talking about walking on leash, some of the cues that you're giving your dog. We talked about hand in your pocket, hand in your bait pouch. That's something that you are conditioning your dog to rely on. So be aware of that. Really formal posture. It's amazing how when we have a new student in training, how they'll be very like formal as they're walking their dog, like very stiff. And then when they go out to walk their dog in the real world, they'll just walk normally because you're not going to walk so stiff. And so you're going to have to start to add a little bit of that relaxed body posture. You know, you're still going to
little shoulder roll
maintain
there,
those. I'm shrugging all day long here. You're going to have to maintain those same high expectations. But for your dog, they also need to see the picture that, you know, whether we're training or this is happening in the real world, there's no difference. You know, so it's part of the transition away from like really having to donkey and carrot your dog walking is figuring out how to replicate.
I like that saying.
How to replicate your real life situations in a training situation. Yeah. So just relax a little bit. Kayl talked about leash tension. That's a huge one. There are so many people that add that little bit of tension on the dog's leash and the dog looks like they're walking great because they're walking in position. The dog needs to choose to be in that position. You need to use leash redirections if they get out of position or if they start to charge ahead, but you must give them a chance to be rewarded on a loose leash. They have to choose that. Sits and downs. How many times off the top of your head do you say sit?
Before your dog responds.
Before you get a response, yeah. How many times are you saying sit? What's your expectation? The other thing that I very commonly see is...
What do you want your expectation to be? That's even a good question.
Right.
Because some people don't even realize that they can have super high expectations and that the dogs can absolutely crush it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I lost my train of thought there.
How many times are you asking your dog to sit?
When you ask your dog to sit, are you saying, sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down, and wondering why your dog stares at you like, which one do you want? Do you want the down? And then you start to see your down
That's
fall
a big
apart.
pet peeve
And
of
people
mine.
are like, well, he used to know how to
poor
down.
dog.
Sit down. Okay, lie down. I mean, it's just too much. So be clear with those young dogs. Be very clear with your expectations. If you don't get the response you want, you might need to place your dog in that position, especially when it comes to something like the sit. If your dog knows how to sit, if they're responding reliably already in a less distracting environment or whatever the situation might be, then you might have to show them how to be successful.
I think another common thing that people do when they're trying to get their dog to listen is they do a lot of like extra physical cues that are unneeded, like bending over the dog or the old snap and point or whatever it might be. And again, those are all fine to do if you are hoping to do that forever. And if that's the case, no problem. But, you know, our goal is to be able to, you know, if I'm walking my dog and I'm hiking or my dog's even at a further distance, I want to be able to yell, lie down, and have the dog drop just on my word. I don't want to have to come over and bend over my dog and do all those types of things in order for my dog to listen to me. So, and the way you avoid all of these things is being conscious of what you're doing with your body language.
Absolutely.
When you're teaching and training and expecting your dog to do these things so that they don't become dependent on it. And I don't know if you guys know this, but dogs learn physical cues way faster and more easily than anything that's verbal, which is why it's hard to achieve verbal control. It's a more challenging level of training to achieve. But some of the things that we're talking about today are exactly how you get to that level where your dog really understands to listen to your voice and you do not have to be dependent on some of those other things.
And you know, lots of links. Luton is dropping some important information here in the chat. He said, we've had some steps backward in training. It's part of the growth of the dog. Work through it. You've got this. I love that attitude, number one, from Dan the Man.
So
but
good.
what is also really important to take away from that, this is a dynamic process. And when we talk about having a leash on your dog, if you aren't 100% sure that they're going to be successful, when we talk about having a long line on your dog, it's going to allow your dog to make those mistakes, but you're ultimately going to have enough control that you can train through these situations. It's so important that as you make your way through the dog training process, that you set your expectations high. Because ultimately, you know, you aim for the stars and you're quite happy with whatever result you get, but you set those standards so high and you really reinforce for your dog that this is all about learning. if you make a mistake, it's not a big deal because we're going to work through it. And I'm going to show you how to be right.
I love when it happens that my dog makes an error and I'm like fully prepared to deal with it. My line's on, I have a reward tucked away, ready and waiting, and my dog, makes a poor choice. Maybe she's a little bit slow to respond, or she decides she's going to eat rabbit poo in the yard instead of come towards me, and I can follow through, because all of those moments where she sort of understands that when I ask her to do something, I expect her to listen and that I'm going to do something about it. She goes, okay, I need to pay attention. And, when I'm ready to deal with it with great timing by having, all my ducks in a row before taking her outside, that just gives me more reliability. And the more times I can follow through consistently, the less I have to train it and the quicker the dog learns to do the behavior. And then I don't really have to worry about following through anymore. It's what's challenging with dogs is that, once they learn something, it's not really guaranteed that they're perfect at it for the rest of their life. A lot of things need to be maintained. And if we get sloppy with our criteria, or we start calling the dog, come, and not really expecting the dog to listen, we can weaken and dampen our dog's response very, very quickly. So it's really up to us to follow through and to give our dogs good information.
Two things. Number one, I just looked at our confidence monitor and I think I'm getting white beard hair.
Oh my God, you're getting so old.
This is terrifying. I just realized that. Yeah.
I look at the confidence mirror and be like, my roots. Oh, you're so cute. My roots are really long, and I got like a rock and bun going on tonight. Look at the height of this thing.
It's a tall bun.
I feel like I would have to be careful going outdoors.
Or eat through a doorway.
I like that. What's the girl on The Simpsons? Marge has the tall hair, some really great questions coming in through the chat. I'm trying to grab as many as I can. The chat is moving pretty quickly, but I don't want the next skill, behavior, element of training that we're going to talk about is your come command. And I just thought of something. I wonder if we show some of the cues, the accidental cues that people are giving in classes. Maybe this is a good opportunity for you guys at home to see some of the mistakes that you might be making and have that aha moment where you're like, that's exactly what I'm doing, because we get to see them over and over again. And there are some things that we commonly are talking to our students about when they are teaching the come command. Why don't we do that? Maybe to load this up a little bit. Timing is crucial when it comes to to dog training in general. Should I get a dog while you talk about this?
Yeah. You can. That's okay. Grab a dog now. I mean, do we even need a dog? No, I don't think we do, and it might be a little distracting. Coco's dropping
That's my version
the super
of
chat.
toot.
I'm just going to finish this thought really quickly, but timing is so important, especially when it comes to your recall command, your come command. So we're going to talk in just a moment. Oh, there's Hippie Shake.
Gosh.
Look at Shaker. That's pretty cute.
Oh, shaking bacon.
Very
poo.
Cool. Thank you, Coco, for the super chat. We're gonna. And Alex dropped a $2.99 super chat.
Gosh.
I'm gonna be tooting all over the place here. I'm gonna have to double toot, I guess.
Yeah, we both know you're good at that.
That's true. Thanks for the super chats, guys. We'll answer your questions in just a moment. Well, you know what? Let's answer the super chats. Then we'll go over to our the training moment back behind us in the train station. I know you guys have been waiting all night to get us into the train station. Okay, so from Coco. Coco asks, my puppy wraps his paws around me or puts his paws on me a lot. Does this mean he thinks I'm his friend rather than his leader? If so, what can I do? Now, it's not...
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Right, yeah. So
sometimes dogs do it out of affection.
Yeah.
And other times dogs do it because they're being a little bit pushy or a little dominant, as if to say, like, I own you type of thing. The best thing to do is to weigh on the side of caution and to discourage your dog from doing it. However, if you don't mind, having their paw up on you, you might consider teaching them a shake a paw trick, and maybe that's something you've already done, so your dog finds that behavior very reinforcing. And if my dog was doing that a lot, I would just sort of push their paw off and ask them to sit, maybe have them sit there for a few seconds, praise them, and then I might say, give me your paw, and then I would ask for a paw, and then I would pet them, so that it's more that I'm asking for the behavior rather than the dog saying, you must pet me now. I'm initiating it. And if it's a situation where I don't really feel like taking a hold of the dog's paw or having the dog paw me, then I would discourage my dog from doing that, as if to say, you can't really decide to put your paws on me whenever you feel like it. That's something that I'm going to ask you to do or not to do. So I would just follow through with discouraging it, and then again, if it's something that you don't mind doing, ask the dog to do it.
And from Alex says, thank you for the super chat, Alex. Alex says, my 6-month-old border collie has become uninterested in training. Help! Love the all caps. So you need to really think about why, Alex. What is where were you before? Like where was your dog in terms of learning? What were your expectations? Now we're focused on the motivation of the dog. That is the key element to our training. And it's something that I want you at home to focus on as well. And we talk a lot about food and training, but that's not the only thing we use to reward dogs. It depends on the dog. We know it's a great foundational step, but we also want to include some other things into our training. I don't know if you have more to add along to this.
Yeah, I just was sort of thinking like, why is the dog becoming uninterested? Is it happen to be like where you're training? Right. Are you allowing the dog to spend a lot of time running and playing with other dogs? And now you're trying to say, hey, work with me. And the dog's like, why would I play with you? I get to go and do things with other dogs. So sort of think about the dog's daily schedule or structure and where the dog is seeking natural reinforcement. The thing that can be challenging about border collies, herding breeds, any dog in general, to be honest with you, is that once they find ways to self-reward, with border collies, it could be, watching things in the window. It could be chasing shadows. It could be anything really that has to do with, being stimulated. If they find that those things are more valuable than listening to you, they will choose to do them. So you need to figure out how you can up the reward that you're using and how to lower the amount of opportunity that your dog is seeking opportunities to self-reward and be able to not need you for anything. Controlling the dog a little bit more with the leash, staying away from really heavy distractions until you've developed more of a rapport, making sure that you have something high value to offer, and that the dog's not rehearsing a lot of self-rewarding behaviors.
I'm gonna make a video about this, about training session times. This is a
great topic, actually.
Yeah. I want to talk specifically about puppy. In your case, Alex, I know your dog is 6 months old, but I want you to always finish on a high. I want your dog to be wanting to continue working when you end. So if you have consistently gone out, looks like becoming uninterested in training, and I'm going to guess that maybe you have done some training, worked on some training exercises with your dog, and then, once it's all over, you work for half an hour, and then you take off the training bait pouch and your dog's ready to have a sleep inside. But I want you to really keep your training sessions shorter, more intense, because, with your high energy breed, like most border collies, it's really important to maintain that focus. But keep these training sessions condensed. So I would literally take like a handful of their food and like their meal, breakfast or dinner.
Such a great time to train.
Absolutely. And then work on something very short, very fun. Keep it fun for you and the dog. Also, try to figure out, is there something else that your dog really loves? Maybe there's a chew toy or a frisbee or some other thing, tennis ball, whatever the thing is, that your dog also likes, and you can start to like switch it up, randomly reinforce with this other high value reward for your dog. You know what? Maybe, remember Jitterbug with agility? She wasn't that interested in coming back and playing tug, which most dogs do at the end of an agility run. Flyball, sorry. And what she liked more was like if I clapped and then pushed her away, and I clapped and I pushed her away again.
She thought that was the greatest game ever.
Stimulating. So identifying what your dog loves, what your dog finds rewarding, is really going to be important for maintaining that level of motivation. Now we need to keep moving along, because I don't want to miss out on the opportunity to talk about the recall. So why don't we do a few recall commands. I'm going to see if you guys at home can pick out the mistakes that Kayl makes. Maybe you can do a few in a row with a recall, and just sort of give some.
And you don't want me to use the dog?
Whatever you want. Whatever you think will display it better.
I need you to hold the leash if I'm not going to do the dog.
Okay. You know what? All I want to do is toot and head on over to the train station.
I don't want you to toot.
Okay, let's head on over.
Turn that light on.
Oh, yeah. Okay, can you just do an audio check real quick? I gotta see if I set that up.
Check.
You guys hear us okay? I think you can. Yes. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about some of the subtle miscues. And please, no one pay attention to the fact that I'm wearing my slippers. Yeah, my moccasin slippers.
Okay. So, a couple of different things that a lot of people will end up doing when they're practicing the recall that can cause issue is, well, do you want me to not tell them and show them?
Yeah. I want to see, are these guys seeing what we always see?
So this is a common thing that people will often do is they will, they will practice the recall and they have something happening at this point that shouldn't be happening. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And then they try to call the dog that way. There's also another thing that people will do when they call their dog that I happen to be doing right now. This is another thing that people will often do. Come. And they'll...
That's pretty obvious. Yeah. I'm just going to double check what's going on up here.
I'll add some extra body language. Those are all things that the dogs become a little bit dependent on. So I don't know if anybody's guessed yet, but I will tell you the answers.
Maybe you can. So Andrea says tight leash.
Yay!
Jacqueline says Andrea and Jacqueline both say hand in the pocket, food in the pocket.
Oh, we got some smarties on this thing.
Do that one.
I don't know what that means.
Okay, you'll have to figure it out then. What other things might people do when they're doing the recall that pre-cues the dog?
I feel like Kevin and I are playing a game right now. He's trying to cue me as to what I'm supposed to think about, but his hints are not very easy to guess. Another thing that people will often do when they call their dog is they'll call the dog and then they'll start to run away when they call the dog and they haven't actually waited for the dog to turn around to them yet. I'm going to get a dog because this is not very effective to do this by myself.
And this is an unusual thing, but I'd just like to say hello to my district chief who's watching me at home, and I just got a message from him. So how's it going?
Slam. Slammy. Oh, Slam wants to play with the bee. Okay, come here. Give me your head. Out.
Okay.
Here.
Lots of great questions, guys. So keep those questions coming in. I'm doing my best to grab them when I can.
Good. Okay. We're going to just out. Hold on. We are just going to pretend here. Let me grab some treats here. That Slam, here, buddy, is a bit distracted because he doesn't really need to be distracted for me to show you the mistakes here. So a couple common things, is people will call their dog with the leash tight, as you can see. So basically, Slam will then learn to come perfectly when he's on a tight leash. Funky, that's enough. But I don't want him to learn that. My leash needs to be loose when I'm training this so that eventually the leash can go from being loose to being on the ground to eventually being off. Those would be sort of my stepping stones over a long period of time that I'm training. The other thing that people will often do is they'll often have their hand in their pouch, or when they call the dog to come, they'll have the food right on the dog's nose. Now, this is a step that we actually don't care too much about in the beginning stages. In fact, we would recommend when you first start teaching this that your leash is loose, that the food is on your dog's nose. Come. Yes. And you actually use the food to assist your dog to moving towards you. That's how we would start to train the exercise. But once he understands how to actually do it, I don't want to have to always put food on his nose. I want to be able to have, Slam, sit. Back, sit. I want to be able to have a loose leash, no food in my hand, and be able to call him, Slam, hey, sit. You wait, young man. I want him to be able to come towards me without any help. So if I do nothing and just say, come, yay, good boy, he knows to come right to me without any assistance. I didn't have my hand in my pouch. That was a good boy, buddy. I wasn't pulling on the leash. Another common thing that we see people do, here, buddy. Good, here, sit. I'll see if I'll make a mistake here, see if you can pick this out. Wait, come. Yes. So I said come, and I did something else that assisted him to come. Here, Slam, sit. Wait, I'll show you again. Come. Yes, good boy. I don't know. Every time I say come, the peanut gallery beside me gets excited. Come here, sit. So what happens, now I bet what will happen here, is I can probably fake him out. Oh, you're very smart. So I just ran away there without saying come, and what a lot of dogs will start to do is they'll react to you running away, and the come command starts to get watered down and not important. So when I'm practicing this, when I say the command, come, yay, good boy, I wait for him to make the first move, and then I can reward from there. The other thing that often happens on, if we're talking about recall specifically, is the dogs start to get close to the people and people start to panic. And the most common thing that people do when dogs get close is they reach out and they grab a hold of the dog. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was a dog and I was running towards my handler, when I got close, I got grabbed or football tackled, I would be pretty apprehensive to come in close to my handler once again. So we often have to train our students when they're training that when the dog gets close, wait. So if I call him, come, and I bend over like this, you can see how crazy he is. But if I do this and I stand up tall, he settles down. And even dogs that don't have a lot of training will react this way because I have a much different body posture standing up tall as I do bending down. When I go to grab him and I move my handle around, look how silly and crazy he gets. When I stand up tall, it'll look a little bit more informative. Yes, good boy. I get a dog that's a bit more settled. So standing up tall can be really, really helpful when you're practicing this. And then you could, of course, if you have a leash on, I could even step on the leash with my foot. So if he decides to exit stage left and take off on me, he's not going to get very far, and I'm not going to allow him to rehearse taking off and not listening. So those are a couple of things that I think are the most common errors. Did I miss any that you were thinking of?
No, that looked good. And I wanted to say Sue Brown makes a really important point. She said slapping legs. They aren't going to see that if they aren't turned towards you.
Yes. You sound literally like a student from our school because that is absolutely something that we talk about on a regular basis. Good boy.
Okay, are we heading back over here? Okay. I might as well toot again while we're here. So let's get some lights turned off here. So these are some really important elements that I want you to think about when you are working on things like your recall, like you're walking on a loose leash. Be hyper aware of the choices that you're making. You're working so hard to try to get, all of these commands on verbal, but you're often accidentally adding in a few other cues. Not only does it screw around with the timing that you're trying to give your dog, but you're going to quickly create a dependence for it. One of the most common ones is something like a sit and a point. People are often like sit,
snap and point.
sit, or snap. You sit or you lie down. That's okay as long as you forever think that you're going to use that snap and lie down, because remember, you're conditioning, cue, stimulus, whatever that stimulus is, and then behavior. So if you start to change the cue, your dog's going to think, what on earth are you asking of me? This is totally, this is new.
So Dan McCann, my lovely brother, just made a comment about Slam's putting his paws up on me. Remember we were talking about that earlier. Yeah. So and then this is sort of where this is actually a good thing to point out. Come here, Slam. Hop up. Hop up. Yeah, hop up. Good boy. So I've taught him to jump up with his paws because I like when he comes up and we have a little snuggle. But the reason why I give him the opportunity to do this, because if I say off, yay, just with one cheerful command, he'll get off. Okay, come here. Come see me again. Come here. Up, up. Yay, good boy. I can ask him up, off, and I can ask him down. So because I have the ability to control him, I'm more than happy to give him some freedom to come up and have some loving with me. I like to have a little snuggle too, but again, I don't want him to just, jump on me whenever he wants to. It's something that I've trained as a trick. And again, this is just personal preference. If you don't want your dog to jump up on you at all, if you don't like that, then that's totally okay. But if it's something that you do enjoy, just know that you can turn things on and you can turn things off with some training.
There are some questions that made it through that were outside of the super chats that I wanted to touch base on and some comments. So Andrea has been really active in the chat tonight, but Andrea said, I use my GoPro and it helped me see a lot of my mistakes. And I think that's a great idea.
Oh, such a good idea.
If you're working on skills at home with your dog, it is such a helpful thing to record yourself and really be aware of all of the things that you're doing, whether it's a physical cues that you might be giving or whatever. It's a really, really important step in terms of your training to be aware of those things. What else have we seen? Kim mentioned, got a new puppy last week and your videos are my bread and butter. Thank you for the videos. Thank you very much, Kim. That's really nice of you to say.
Let's be friends. That's so cute.
Shauna, I like this. I find a disconnect. I have to use verbal cues and a hand signal. I use a wheelchair and don't use them. My husband does. Now he ignores the cues. So we do in a little bit more advanced. So after like our foundational skills training, we will teach hand signals as part of the cues. But you do need to be able to reinforce the behavior. You also need to help your dog to be right if they're wrong. Let's talk a little bit about what changes maybe Shauna could make to help her verbal cues maybe have a little bit more meaning. It sounds like her husband may be undoing some of these cues.
Yeah, I think consistency is really important, but I also think I do know from personal experience that lots of times dogs can learn to listen really reliably to one person, and then if the other family members aren't doing the work to make sure that the dog's listening to them too. Some dogs, it doesn't mean that the dog's going to stop listening to everybody. It certainly is not helpful if other family members aren't following through with things. But, if you have a good enough rapport for your dog, with your dog, you will be able to, continue to get the responses that you want. And then maybe your husband's going to have to work a little harder on the consistency part of things.
For sure. I'm just going to move some of these questions out of the way. Andrea Dunton says, we have a border collie, and when he gets focused on things that he feels he needs to bark at, it's nearly impossible to break his focus. How can we distract him so that he listens? Now, this is going to be an important timing lesson for you, Andrea. Your dog's going to give you a couple of cues that he's likely going to get distracted. The sooner you can interrupt that behavior, the sooner you can get your dog working or attention back on you, the more likely you are to be successful. You need to be a more proactive trainer rather than a reactive trainer. Waiting, what's he going to do? Let's see what happens here. Do something to interrupt that thought pattern. Do something to get your dog's attention back on you. Get them keep them from focusing on that other distraction, especially when it's a border collie. Make sure you have the management tools in place, leash, long line, whatever, and interrupt them before they reach that point where your dog thinks, I have to do something. I have to bark. I have to chase. I have to something.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I might suggest as well, obviously, I have a border collie. We have a couple border collies. I had a border collie that really struggled with being mentally calm around cars. She was highly stimulated by them, wanted to chase them. And I found it extremely helpful to walk her with a gentle leader because it had a really nice calming effect on her and allowed me to turn her head away and just address her without having to do these big, massive corrections or things like that. I could just get through to her with a lot less physical, what's the word? Gumption, input. Input. And she was a bit calmer minded. So you could also try something like that for times when the dog is really stimulated. And then in addition to all the things that Ken said as well.
For sure. I wanted to go to our camera too. I'm just going to go to camera
you
2
can't
for a
really
second.
see him.
You can't see him now, but Slam was
having a total party with that big kitty.
Yeah.
Where's your beanie? Where's your beanie? Eat it.
Laszlo mentions my Frenchton is perfect, and all of a sudden when he's going out he wants to run away from me in the backyard. When I want to go pick him up, what am I doing wrong? We actually have a video that's going to be perfect for you, Laszlo. It's something, I wish I could remember what it was called. How to get control of your dog, or are you looking to get more control of your dog? Something like that. But number one, long line or leash or some way to affect change and make sure the dog can't continue running away from you. Another thing you can do is
collar grabs.
Yeah.
I can show. Do you want me to show?
Yeah, that's a good idea. So let's for any of you guys who are struggling with control and think like, oh, my dog just loves running away from me. This is going to be a good exercise for you, really reinforcing in close. It's also going to be a good exercise for me to toot. And let's take us on over to the train station.
Good. Okay, so when I train this exercise, I always attach a leash, and when your dog's in the backyard, I would have the dog drag a leash or a long line as well because you'll need this for control. But one of the things that we do with all of our dogs is really teach them that when they come close to us and sort of allow us to take their collar, really good things happen. So that if I need to reach down and take a hold of his collar and pick him up or do whatever I need to do, he never shies away from me because of all of the conditioning I've done. So with the leash on, I might even just step on it so he can't really go anywhere. I'm going to get a couple cookies out.
Okay, should I go in for a zoom camera here?
Oh yeah, zoom in, hun. Zoom right in. What?
Is that a better shot here?
Sure, yeah. Perfect. So I'm going to take, I'll use my outside hand so they can see them. I have some food on the nose, and rather than grabbing him right away, I don't want to startle him or make him nervous. I'm going to take the food, I'm going to draw him in close, and while he's snacking away, I'm going to take my other hand, and I'm going to reach in and take a hold of his collar. Yes. And I'm going to yes and feed. Good boy, yes. Now once I'm done feeding, I'm going to let go. So the highest value point is when my hand's in the collar. So I'm going to try it again. I have food in this hand. I'm going to draw him in close. Take a hold of his collar. Yes. Yes. Yes, good boy. And then I'm going to release. And then what I can start to do, okay, is if he's a bit further away, you'll notice if I bring my hand out, okay, yay, okay, yes, good boy. He comes in close so I can take a hold of him and then I can reward him from there. Okay, good boy. Yes, good boy. So I just practiced taking a hold of that collar and then rewarding him. And I practice that, you know, in commercial breaks or here, bud, when I'm waiting for the coffee to brew in the morning, or, you know, little tiny bits, you know, all the time, so that he's getting really comfortable with it, so that when he is outside and I need to get a hold of him, we've had all kinds of repetitions of wanting to come in. The other thing I would do outside, just to make sure the dog's not being a little stinker, is before I try this, I would step on the leash first so that the dog can't get away and run, and then I would just approach the puppy with some food initially, take a hold of the collar, feed, then I would pick the puppy up. So what a lot of people do is just reach in and pick the dog up, and some dogs sort of say, you're going to stop me from playing outside. I don't want that to happen. So I have to condition the dog to come in. So hopefully that will be helpful to you.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Okay.
Come back.
Whoops, sorry.
Gail's dropping knowledge.
And metal leashes and metal buckets. Sorry about the bang.
Yes, it's quite a loud ringy sound. And you guys, you can't see all the toys, but Slam has removed a lot of the toys from the toy bin.
He is like loving life back there right now.
So let's go back to the queue for a second. Again, Paul, this is a really common question. Paul asks, how long should a puppy training session last? We go through a lot of treats. Again, portioning out part of your dog's meal is going to be really important. But again, as we mentioned earlier, I want all of you guys, and there's a reason that I'm going back to this. Focus on motivation, keep it fun, end on a high. That's so important when you want your dog to like training, to love working with you. Don't work until they're either tired or full or just completely disinterested. You need to really focus on keeping it fun for them. Pika Steph asks, what are some ways to add distractions? I don't have other dogs to add eventually to practice with all commands. So let's talk about some of the distractions we might add in our training to prove.
Yeah, well, a couple of different things. If your dog is distracted by toys, that sometimes is a great thing to practice around, just to sort of get the dog's interest off of you so that you can work on getting it back. Slam's got all kinds of distractions out behind him right now. The other thing that we find is a big distraction is food. So we might initially use food as a distraction for our dogs, in addition to rewards that we would have on our bodies as well. But we would start off with it being controlled. So having it, in a container with like holes on the top so that the smell can come out. But if the dog was to, go up to the container, they couldn't actually get the food and self-reward. And then we would progress to having the food like out and about and, a bit of a harder distraction. One of my favorite recall distractions is to take, some kibble and throw it out into the grass or out into the snow, like, 10 or 12 pieces. And while my dog's sort of searching around to find it, practice calling the dog to come. That's a great distraction that I don't really need a lot of help for. I can sort of set the dog up myself.
Right.
And then lastly, if the dog's ready for this, just simply changing locations. Dogs are super situational. So if you happen to be training in the same location all the time, dogs typically get very comfortable and focused in those scenarios. And then as soon as you change to a different room or front yard, backyard, or park or cottage or whatever it happened to be, it's like the dog's like, oh my goodness, the rules can't possibly be the same here. So that's why it's a good idea to change locations. And we have a lot of area to train our dogs here, which is great, but they get very comfortable. So when our dogs, especially when they're young, we make a special effort to put I know Slam's having like a total
I apologize.
party.
If anybody's got a dog that absolutely loves squeaker toys at home, Slam is having a party right now.
So happy.
And your dog at home is probably like, where is that
Oh
sound
my God,
coming
his
from?
face is hysterical. What was I saying? Oh, we would put our young dogs in the car and we would drive down to like the waterfront or whatever, and just stand in front of the shops or stand in front of a bank or sit down and go for ice cream and take the puppy with us and just have them lie at our feet. That's not a normal lifestyle for us because of where we live, but we want to expose our dogs to different situations to help them be more confident and social. So we'll make efforts to change their location, and when we do do that, we have our leash, we have our treats, we have our gentle leader, we have whatever we need and our toys, and we're in training mode when we're there to give the dog the best experience and information possible.
And consistent information. Now, you guys know that we like to do, you can see Slam, oh, he heard me, and now he's paying attention to me. I don't know if can you guys see him over my shoulder? He's just grabbing every single toy in the toy basket because he's so excited about being on camera. You guys know that we, from our podcast channel, we like to take some audio questions. So I'm going to grab an audio question from someone who's in our chat today. Her name's Kelly.
Kate Bean.
So
bring
Kelly,
here. Bring it here. Out.
Kelly's gonna get her
take the squeaky toy away from
her question on the air. So let's see what Kelly has to say. Oops, let me get this. Okay.
Hi guys, love your stuff, but have a couple questions. I have a 4-month-old golden retriever, and our biggest problem is barking and jumping while we're in the kitchen, making our food, his food, and eating dinner. I have watched the videos of jumping and quiet, and he only listens to the command intermittently. I'm trying to reward the behavior, but it does not seem to be getting through at all. That would be great if we could get a lot of help with that one. Also, his walking seems to be he has more difficulty in the morning versus at night. I give more treats more often to try and reward him more to keep him on track, but that doesn't also seem to be working. And when dogs and other people walk by, huge pulling and struggling there.
Yeah.
Last question. I guess my big question, how long do we reward these behaviors for? How long am I giving him treats for all of these things? Because I'm going through treats like it's going out of style. Thanks for all your help. Please get back to me.
Something that, thank you, Kelly, for your question. So there's a few, we'll have to sort of unpackage all of that. There's a lot going on. But what I want to talk about for sure off the top is treats. I know lots of links, Luton. Dan, the moderator man, mentioned that lots of people are asking here in the chat, when do I stop using treats? Like, how do I know when I can reduce the treats? How do I know when I can stop using treats?
Well, it's not a specific answer, which is why we don't usually talk about, like, when your dog gets to this many months, then you can take it off, or step this, you take it off. Basically, it sort of depends on the scenario and how well the dog is doing. But sometimes what happens is, you could put a steak in front of your dog's nose, and if they want to pull towards the other dogs and they find that more valuable, they don't care about the steak. They don't care about the food. And that kind of sounds what's happening with this dog is he's so distracted and excited by the distractions that he is not interested in the food. So in this case, the food's really not going to be helpful. What is going to be helpful is how you address the dog in that moment. So for example, rather than allow the dog to pull towards another dog, I might, use the leash to redirect the dog and turn and go, in the complete opposite direction. Or I might move the dog off the side of the sidewalk and place the dog into a sit at my side and work on some calming exercises like holding a sit. And if my dog is just a complete nightmare in that moment, I'm going to move further away from the distractions. But what I don't want to do is just succumb to those distractions and say, oh, this is frustrating, I'm just going to let the dog do what it wants, because that just makes the situation so much more challenging. Once the dog is in a situation where they're a bit more calm-minded, they're further away from the distractions, and you've established control by using the leash, a lot of dogs will then go back to accepting the food, and it will be working a lot better. The equipment that you use when you're training can also really help the dog. Right. Sometimes if you have like a golden, they can be typically even pretty strong at 4 months. Maybe making sure the collar is well fit, it's snugly up on the dog's neck, it's not so loose that it could slip over the head, that you're learning the technique to redirect the dog. There's lots of things to think about in terms of the house stuff where the dog is barking when the food is being made. Working on balancing, rewarding the dog when it's quiet, and then also addressing the dog when it's barking is really important. In those situations, we can't just reward the good stuff. We also have to address the bad stuff as well. Right. Otherwise, they don't know that it's wrong. So we would suggest that you scold the dog with your voice when it barks. With us, we often will say quiet, and it's not like quiet. We say it in
hey,
yeah,
like
a pretty affirmative type of tone. And then we would see what the dog does. If we say quiet and the dog says, oh, okay, sorry, I didn't mean to, then we would follow that firm quiet command with gentle praise. Good, quiet, that's better. And we would use, motivating sounds to reinforce the good behavior. After a little while has passed, then I would introduce the food. I wouldn't use the food right away. We have a lot of dogs that will bark because they get fed right after for being quiet, and the dog goes, I bark, I'm quiet, and then you feed me. I bark, I'm quiet, and then you feed me. And then the barking actually continues to happen. It's a bit of a vicious circle because of that 1 second time rule I explained way earlier, in the chat. If I say quiet and the dog's a bit sassy and they just bark anyways, I would repeat quiet.
Did she say sassy weird?
Sassy.
If they bark and the dog's a bit sassy.
I think you need to say sassy
strange.
that way.
Oh, maybe.
If the dog is sassy, then I had an English accent that time. Then you should repeat quiet and then take the leash that the puppy should have on in the house to ensure that you have control. And I would lift up on the leash to give the dog a little correction for that and say, hey, quiet. And I would just sort of tighten the leash around the dog's, cause the collar to sort of come up around the dog's neck as if to say quiet. Once you do that, most puppies will be like, oh, I don't really like that. You'll loosen the leash and then again, good, quiet. That's a good puppy. Praise genuinely, sweetly, and then redirect them to something else so that it can't sort of happen. And if it's a repetitive behavior, maybe puppy needs to be in its crate while dinner's being prepared, or puppy needs to be laying on a bed and doing a job.
I love that. I love that idea.
Something's being prepared. You don't want to keep putting your dog in a scenario where they're going to fail. And that's the same rule as when you're walking the dog or whatever. If you're constantly failing, you do not want to be repeating that particular step with the dog. You need to switch things up so that you have success.
That sort of brings me to Valerie's point. Valerie mentioned exercising a dog eliminates a lot of behavior issues. And you're right. We actually have a video that we published a few weeks ago that talks about 4 exercises that you can do with your dog that have nothing to do with walking, because I would much rather... Oh, shoot. Who asked this question about walking? I apologize. I've sort of lost track. There's so many comments. But I would rather that you focus on, 150 yards or whatever, 100 meters of excellent walking, and rather than going for a walk around the entire block that's like, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. You're never really sure. Insist on that great behavior while your dog is learning. Eventually, after some good information, you're going to be able to do those full block walks.
Dan just shared that link about the exercises.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Lots of links for dropping that link in the chat.
Thank you, Dan.
But exercising does eliminate a lot of behavior issues, and it's a great way to have a dog that's a little bit more thoughtful. However, exercising alone isn't training. It's just exercising. So you need to differentiate there. A couple other things I wanted to mention. Kurt, where'd it go? Kurt R. I mean, like, I want more train whistle.
Is that our Kurt R?
I don't know. But Kurt R might be. He wants more train whistle. I think I can give it to him. Here you go, Kurt R. It's an extra long toot just for you. The other thing I wanted to mention was Chelsea. I see Chelsea here. She's one of our My Dog Can students, and she said something really nice, and I'm just going to throw it in here. She said, My Dog Can has been the best investment in training we've made thus far. We're huge fans.
I've seen lots of questions
and
from
love
Chelsea.
learning with you guys. Would love to come to Canada to bring our pup to do some training IRL. So we do have My Dog Can. It's our online training group. It's our online coaching group.
I did see a lot of people say, I wish you lived in my area.
I know, And My Dog Can is the way that you can work with us. We just actually dropped a new version of the program that you can check out, but that is an opportunity for you guys to train with us. Now, I have a lot of thank yous to give out. We had a lot of super chats here. We had some really, really great questions.
Such good questions.
Thank you guys for supporting the train station. I want to, before we go, Bo Ling says, here from England, it's 2 a.m. My puppy keeps waking me out, won't settle in the crate. I let her sleep in my bed last night as she wasn't feeling well. You have a little bit of work to do, but I know you can get through this. For sure. Just that consistency. We actually have that crate breaking video overnight. Thank you, guys.
Susan Wesley, we do a live every other Thursday at 7:30
every 2 weeks.
EST.
Yeah. You know what? I actually have, I think, a link to My Dog Can might be if you're on mobile.
Dan just put the link to My Dog
Can. The free mystery box. So you'll be able. That's for the free mystery box. Okay, great. He's got them both. See. I just need to trust lots of links that he's going to get the job done.
And he's just answering all the questions, so
man.
we'll just sit here and
this
look
guy's
pretty.
Good. Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan. Go for it. We love you. Yeah. Okay. Every other Thursday at 7:30.
Every second Thursday.
And hang out with us here.
Thank you guys, everybody, for hanging out with us, asking great questions. We can't wait to hang out with you.
Laying it down.
In
Lots of
2
links.
Thursdays. If this is your first time on the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We publish new videos every single week to help you to have a well-behaved, four-legged family member. On that note, I'm Ken.
I'm Kayl.
Happy training, guys. Bye for now.